Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon out there. Hey, so today, I want to talk about the WNBA again. One of my favorite topics because that's a sports thing that's going on right now, and there's a lot out there to talk about. Uh, but before I get into this, I want to just ask you guys to help me grow. Subscribe to the channel, hit like, drop me some comments, let me know what you think at the end of this. So, hot take. My hot take today is simple. I do not believe the WNBA has a racism problem. I know that's one of those things that's been going around lately today. If you've been watching the WNBA, lots of drama in the WNBA. But I do not think that organization or that sports entity has a racism problem. Now, I must. I'm not saying that racism does not exist in the WNBA because it does. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying players haven't been subjected to racist comments, threats, or disgusting behavior. What I'm saying is something completely different. The WNBA doesn't have a racism problem that is unique to the WNBA. What the WNBA has right now is a visibility problem. And ironically, that's a good thing. It's a good problem to have. It's one that the WNBA wasn't ready for. I still don't think they're ready for it, and we're gonna get into how the opinion how they should handle it, what it looks like, and all of that stuff. So let's start off by saying this: racism has always been in sports. If you follow sports for any length of time, you know this. Racism didn't arrive in professional sports in 2024. It didn't arrive with Caitlin Clark. It didn't arrive with Angie Reese, and it certainly didn't originate in the W. We've seen bananas thrown at black players on soccer games, or as we say, we call it soccer. They call it football over here in Europe, but we've seen that. NFL players have dealt with racial abuse from fans. NASCAR has dealt with it. College football has dealt with it. College basketball has dealt with it. And here's something important that you need to understand that sort of encapsulates what I'm trying to say here. The bigger the sport, the more opportunity there are for bad actors to enter the sports. Not an excuse by any stretch of the imagination, it's an observation. So, what changed? Here's where I think the WNBA conversation gets interesting. The W didn't suddenly become populated by racist people. The audience got dramatically bigger. That's what happened. And those are two completely different things. In 2023, nationally televised WNBA games averaged roughly 462,000 viewers. Then Caitlin Clark arrived. Say what you want about Caitlin Clark, but there was a freshman group of professional of college athletes came in, led by whatever you think of her, led by Caitlin Clark. And we're going to get into some numbers that's going to sort of I'll elaborate on my point. But yeah, and I got it. Angel Reese came in through. A lot of other great players came in. But when she arrived in 2024, the league nationally televised regular season average jumped to approximately 657 viewers. That was 657,000 viewers. So you're talking from 426, almost 200,000 more people. The WNBA, these were the highest averages that the WNBA has seen in 24 years. Okay, let's look at ESPN. The 2024 WNBA regular season averaged approximately 1.19 million viewers on ESPN platforms. People, that is 170% increase from 2023. 170%. If I was in the stock market and I was getting that, count me in. I ain't getting that. But think about that. And here's another, and go back to the Caitlin Clark effect, which really tells part of this story. Indiana Fever games featuring Caitlin Clark, not when she was missing or something like that, but it hurt her out. But games featuring Caitlin Clark averaged approximately 1.18 million viewers. Other NBA games that did not include Caitlin Clark, about 394,000. Think about that. You have one team that was drawing roughly 3 times the audience of the rest of the league. And of the 22, here's another stat when we talk, when we get into this Caitlin Clark effect and how this is affecting, because this is going to tie into something later on when we talk about her fans. In the 2024 of the 22 regular season WNBA games in 2024 that attracted at least 1 million viewers, of those 22 games, 19 of those games involved the Indiana Fever. 19 out of 22 involved one team. That isn't small. That's a seismic shift in exposure from what people were seeing, from the people that were putting their eyes on the W. It was massive. And I think that's the part we were missing. So when you increase the audience, you don't just increase the number of people watching, you increase the number of everybody watching. The casual fan, the passionate fan, families watching together, the basketball junkies, person who discovering basketball for the first time, person who hates the NBA, person who loves Caitlin Clark, the person who hates Caitlin Clark, people who's never watched an WNBA game before, and yes, racist, trolls, extremists, the people looking simply to attack somebody. They came with that audience as well. They came with that growing audience, that group of people. Now, and those numbers are continuing to rise. Because, here's something I think that's even more important, just to let you know, Caitlin Clark affected that game. But let's think now. The story of the rise of the NBA was not just about Caitlin Clark anymore, and it's not. It's not at the moment. She's still pouring fire on it, but it's not just about her. Listen to these numbers. The 2024 WNBA draft averaged 2.4 million viewers. That's the draft. That is the year she came out. That was the year that Caitlin Clark was drafted. So it was up 328% from their previous year. That's how many people watched the WNBA, not the NBA draft, the WNBA draft. The WNBA All-Star Game averaged 304 million viewers. This is in 2024, up 305%. The 2024 WNBA postseason averaged approximately 1.1 million viewers, up 139% from 2023. Now remember, I think the Indiana Fever still got eliminated early on, like the second round, but people were still watching. And the finals, the finals were at 1.6 million. Indiana was not in the final. So they were up 115%. Then came 2023. There was only 2024. 2025 rolls around. Remember, she missed a significant time of that. Caitlin Clark missed a lot of that time because she was hurt. So lots of games she missed. However, the W kept growing. Listen to these numbers. ESPN Network averaged approximately 1.3 million viewers during the 2025 season, regular season. That's still a 6% growth increase. So let's stop pretending this is simply, Caitlin Clark. This is Caitlin Clark made people watch. That's part of the story. 100%. I believe that. I think that. Not just Caitlin Clark, but Caitlin Clark had a huge effect. And if you're not willing to admit that, then I don't know what to tell you. She had a tremendous effect, right? But Caitlin Clark was just an accelerant. The WNBA became this destination, and when the audience explodes, the microscope simply got bigger. So let's look at soccer, for instance, or football or soccer. If you're in Europe or any place other than the United States, it's called soccer or football. Any place in the United States, it's called soccer. But here's a comparison that's I think is fascinating. And we're going to talk about English soccer. Kick It Out. That's this organization that monitors discrimination in football received 737 racist reports from 23 to 24. That was a 47% increase from the previous year. And racism itself represented approximately 55% of all reports received by that organization. Now, I'm not going to tell you that that means soccer is more racist than the WNBA. That would be me being intellectually dishonest. Why? Because we don't have these identical stats to compare the two. Like, we don't have a universal database where you can say the NFL, NBA, NASCAR, NHL, all report racism exactly the same, using, the same definition and methodology. So I'm not going to make up a stat just to make the argument sound better. I'm not saying soccer is more racist than the W. I'm saying it's a major sport. Billions of eyes are on it. Lots of trolls. But I'm trying to establish something though, and that is racism is not unique to women's basketball. It's not unique to the W. It's a problem that exists throughout sports. And here's where I think something gets really, really interesting as well. Think about what happens when somebody throws a banana onto a soccer field, right? And that's a thing that happens in soccer. 30 years ago, maybe 1,000 people in the stadium saw it. Maybe a few television cameras caught it. Maybe it appeared in the news the next day. Today, that same thing happens. Someone records it with a phone, it gets on TikTok, then it goes on X, then it goes to Instagram, then it's on YouTube, then ESPN, CNN, then every sports podcast in America and Europe is carrying it. Suddenly, one idiot in a stadium has become a global story. The behavior doesn't necessarily become more common. Our ability to see it becomes exponentially greater. And I think that's what's kind of happening in the W right now. So the WNBA, the W, they're under this microscope. They're under a microscope they've never been under before. In 2024, the WNBA was suddenly drawing millions of viewers. Those viewers weren't all traditional WNBA fans. They were coming from the NBA. They were coming from college basketball, sports betting. We're going to talk about that later. Social media, Caitlin Clark's enormous following, Angel Reese's enormous following, and for people who simply wanted to see what all this excitement was about. That created an entirely different environment. Suddenly, something that might once have been an ugly comment between a handful of fans became national news. And there's another factor we need to discuss. And I talked about this, I mentioned this earlier, I alluded to this earlier. Money. What they say, more money, more problems. Sports betting has exploded on the scene recently. So in 2024, Americans legally waged over $150 billion in sports. I'm going to say that again. In 2024, Americans legally wagered roughly legally. I'm not talking about side bets, outside bets, bookies running. I'm not talking about any of that. Legally wagered $150 billion on sports. Sports books generated approximately $13.7 billion in revenue, profits. A sports betting bookie, right? And the NFL alone was projected to attract approximately $35 billion in legal wagers during the 2024 season. Think about that. $35 billion. Now ask yourself this question. What happens when somebody has money riding on a game? They don't just watch it. They become emotionally invested in every position, every referee call, every missed free throw, every turnover, every field goal, every strike, every missed shot. And sometimes that emotion turns to anger, especially when these people start losing money. Talk about the kicker. I'm not sure how many of you out there watched watch football, but I heard somebody mention this before, and it was a pungent point. If you've ever watched SEC football, you know exactly what I'm talking about. A kicker misses a field goal at the end of a huge game, and his team loses. And suddenly, that kid isn't just a college athlete anymore. He's a target. Fans can find him on social media. They find his family. They send him messages. They threaten him. And yes, there have been numerous reports over the years of athletes receiving threats following poor performances. Why? Because the relationship between the fan and the athlete has changed. Fans weren't just watching anymore. A fan may have had money on that game. And when you combine tribalism, anonymity, social media, and money, that's a dangerous cocktail. So let me be clear. I want to be clear on this as well. Not saying gambling causes racism. I'm saying gambling can increase emotional intensity. And when emotional intensity meets an anonymity and a bad actor, you just get some ugly behavior. Now, bring this back to the W, right? Imagine being a player in the WNBA for 10 years. You've always had fans. You've always had critics. You've always you've always had trash talk. You've always had people who don't like you. Then suddenly, your league goes from hundreds of thousands of viewers to millions. Games are everywhere. Names are trending. You know, your face is on ESPN. Your performance is being discussed and dissected on national TV now. Something that 10 years ago, none of that was happening. But that includes some very good people, and that includes some very, very bad people. Angel Reese, you know, like I said, I have to bring these up because these are two prominent people in this league right now. And she's talked about this openly. She says she's experienced racism, death threat, people going as far as going to her home. And specifically said, now she also said she did not believe Caitlin Clark stood behind that behavior. In fact, Caitlin Clark has come out several times saying, I don't condone this stuff. I'm not sure what people think she can do about, a million people that she don't know. You know, she's not responsible for them. She can only say, hey, look, this is where I am with this. So if you come in to see me for that, don't. And she said that several times. But she is not responsible. Caitlin Clark, Andrew, none of those other WNBA players are responsible for the player, are responsible for the behavior of every person who calls them their fan. They're just not responsible for them. You know, Angel Reese is not responsible for the behavior of every person who calls her fan. These women are competitors. They're not enemies. Their only rivalry, I truly believe, is on the basketball court. You know, some people turn it into something else. I choose not to, but that's their problem. I think the only issue Angel Reese has with Caitlin Clark is she wants the W. Caitlin Clark wants the W. I think once they leave the court, that's it. I think there's this other thing out there that gets to make up the other stuff that happens in the ether. Caitlin Clark has condemned racism and hateful behavior directed at other players. So has Angel Reese. So has many of the coaches out there. Again, but that brings us back to this central question: is the WNBA uniquely racist? I just don't think there's evidence to support that. Is racism occurring in the W? Absolutely. Is it unacceptable? Absolutely. Should the league address it? Absolutely. Should we protect the players? Absolutely. Should fans who threaten athletes face consequences? Absolutely. 100%. But here's a different lens I'm asking you to consider. Maybe we're not witnessing the WNBA becoming a more racist league. Maybe we're witnessing a league that has suddenly become much more visible to the same small percentage of bad actors who's always existed in sports. They've just turned their attention to the W. Numbers matters. The numbers matters. Think about the difference between 400,000 people watching and 1.2 million people watching. That's 3 times the audience. And then let's think about social media. One comment that might have disappeared into the internet 5 years ago can now receive thousands of interactions. The algorithm picks it up, influencers discuss it, the television talk shows will talk about it, then another podcast talks about it, and suddenly the trolls become the story, not the game itself, not this game and the talent that these women have out there. Right? Because every time we amplify the worst person in the room, we give that person more influence. And that's what we do sometimes. We take the worst things, we don't keep the thing about the thing. Basketball. It's about all this other stuff that's out there. So anyway, what I will say, what I want to say is, I don't think we should confuse visibility with prevalence. And that's really the point of this entire conversation. Seeing more racism doesn't necessarily mean that there is more racism. Sometimes it means there's more cameras, more microphones, more viewers, more social media, more journalists, more money, more attention, and just more opportunities for bad behavior to become visible. And that's a different proposition right there. What do I think the NBA should do? The answer isn't you can't ignore it. The answer isn't to say, well, every sport has racism, so get over it. Nope, that's not what I'm saying. Racism should be confronted. Threats should be investigated. Fans who cross the line should be removed forever. And when criminal behavior occurs, law enforcement should be involved. Plain and simple. But I also think the WNBA they got an opportunity. Don't let the trolls define the league. And sometimes some people in the media are part of the trolls. Don't let racism become your primary storyline, you know? Don't let social media extremists hijack this beautiful game you girls are playing, those ladies are playing. Because there are many, many millions of people discovering some incredibly talented basketball players. Aja Wilson, Brianna Stewart, Nafisa Collier, Angela Reese, Caitlin Clark, Alyssa Thomas, and dozens of other players who spent years building this league. But here's the irony here. For decades, I mean, the W has wanted more attention, more fans, more college, more TV coverage, more sponsorship, more money, more recognition, and now it's getting it. But with that success comes something every major sports eventually learns. You don't get to choose who joins your audience. The NFL learned it, the NBA learned it, Major League Baseball learned it, NHL learned it, soccer learned it, NASCAR learned it, college sports learned it, and now the NBA is learning. I'm sorry, the WNBA is learning. My final thoughts. When you see racism around the W, let's condemn it absolutely. But let's also put it into context. This isn't a WNBA invention. It's a sports problem. It's a human problem. And perhaps what we're witnessing isn't the WNBA becoming worse. Perhaps we're witnessing the WNBA becoming big enough to experience the problem that comes with being big. And there's a strange compliment hidden inside that uncomfortable reality. Because the reason we're talking about these incidents today is because people are watching. Millions of them. The WNBA has gone from fighting to be noticed to having more attention than it knows what to do with. Caitlin Clark did not create that entire transformation, but she helped accelerate it. And now the league has entered a different world. More money, more fans, more media, more gambling, more social media, more scrutiny, and yes, more bad actors. So maybe the question should be, why does the WNBA have a racism problem? Maybe that shouldn't be the question. Maybe the question should be, what happens in a sport that has always had problems suddenly have millions more people watching it? Because that's what's happening when a league grows. You don't just get more fans, you get the whole world. and everything that comes with the world and everything that's good and bad about it. You know. Anyway, so that's my take on it today. I'm not excusing racism. You know, I'm not minimizing what these phenomenal athletes are experiencing or have to go through. I'm simply asking us to look at the problem through a different lens. The WNBA may not have a racism problem unique to the WNBA. It may have a visibility problem. And maybe that's actually a sign of just how far this league has come. Anyway, I'm out. Thank you guys for listening.